Alrighty, so hello and welcome to everyone. We are elated to have such a crowd and an active interest in what we hope to become an annual event. Before getting into the meat of the event, I'd like to cover a few organizational bases. My name is Zach Perry. I am a recent alum of UR as well as a previous member of the UR Forensics and Debate team that these two will represent. And despite graduating, I'm fortunate enough to be the assistant debate coach here at UR. That said, I want to make a personal plug for the team by saying that anyone and everyone is still welcome to join if this piques your interest. Commitment is entirely what you make of it, and we value a variety of perspectives and conversation cultivated by people who are interested in the pursuit of knowledge and communication. Now for the formalities. The debaters would like to thank first and foremost the organizers and various hands that helped put together the shindig, with a few specific shout-outs including Roger Mancastropa and or Mac, who is the debate coach here at UR, as well as the National Communication Association, the Committee on International Discussion and Debate, and so on, as well as the British National Debate Team. So now on to the stars of the main event. First up from the British team is Richard Hunter. Richard grew up in Bangor, Northern Ireland, and began competitively debating at a young age, twice reaching the final of the Northern Ireland Schools debating competition. He went on to attend the University of St. Andrews, pursuing a degree in modern history. While at the university, he was able to participate in dozens of competitions all over the United Kingdom and Europe, competing against students from all over the world. His debating achievements include reaching the final of the Scottish leg of the John Smith Memorial Mace in 2017, as well as acting as an adjudicator at the European University Debating Championships in 2016 and 2017. When he is not debating, Richard enjoys travel, video blogging, and following his beloved Liverpool FC. Next up, we have Rebecca Howarth. Becky studied economics with German at the University of Birmingham. Can't speak today. Graduating in 2015. Her key debating achievements include reaching the quarterfinals of the European University Debating Championships in Vienna, Austria, and between 2012 and 2015, she won 5 and qualified for the finals of approximately 14 national and international competitions. While studying abroad in Berlin, Becky reached the finals of the German as a foreign language category of the German National Debating Championships, and she is also an accomplished judge, having been selected as a chief adjudicator for approximately 6 tournaments and judging numerous finals, including the Japanese University Debating Championships. Becky currently works in management consulting at PricewaterhouseCoopers, where she runs a debating initiative designed to improve communication skills in the workplace. Now representing Team UR, they are quite short in their bios because they didn't send them to me. We have Kay Dervishi, who is a journalism major from New York, and Julian Scott, who is from Olympia, Washington, studying PPEL with a philosophy concentration. All right, so now that the introductions are out of the way, why are we here? What do you meme? Memes have been a unifying point of our culture since their rapid growth in popularity and prominence in 2012. Richard Dawkins coined the word meme in his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene, as an attempt to explain the way cultural information spreads rapidly. He shortened it from the Greek word mimere to rhyme it with gene in order for it to be a catchy phrase. Due to this prevalence and topicality in everyday life, it would only make sense to scrutinize memes in both academic pursuit and lighthearted conjecture. As we come to understand this paradigm shift, emergence of discourse, and apparent reflection of modern society, what are we to make of this rise of millennial culture? That is precisely why we ask the question, what and why do you meme? And furthermore, is it worth it? How does this work? Our two teams have prepared a case for either side of this resolution, which states, quote, "This House regrets the rise of meme culture," end quote. In order to maintain fairness, we will flip a coin, indicating which side will go first and what position will be taken. Typically, each team is only given about 20 minutes to prepare with no idea what the resolution is, but since we are on a time crunch and wanted to give the audience a chance to gauge their interest beforehand, we had each side prepare a speech for both sides as a means to prevent favoritism while also allowing for a well-informed debate. Each team consists of 2 people. The pro or affirmative is known as the government, and the members consist of the prime minister, PM, and the member of government, MG. And the con or negative side is referred to as the opposition, and its members are known as the leader of opposition, or LU, and the members of opposition, or MU. The teams will debate in this order. The Prime Minister will have 7 minutes for an opening speech. The LU will have an 8-minute opposition beginning speech. The MG will have 8 minutes. The MU will have 8 minutes. The LU will have 4 minutes. The PM will have 5 minutes. So it's a back and forth volley that hopefully gives us enough time to really dig into this topic. The format will be consistent with that of NPDA, which is the National Parliamentary Debate Association rules, which follows Robert's Rules of Order, among other procedural jargon that probably means nothing to most of you here. The debate will also be adjudicated by yours truly, and be evaluated holistically based on the appropriateness of the principles set forth by the government, clarity and depth in argumentation, evidence, analysis, and warrant provided by both sides, and overall presentation. The winner will then be decided by a split house in which you all, the audience, will decide who the winner is by dividing onto each separate side, whichever you think the argument was better. So without further ado, let's begin. We will begin with a coin toss. Who wants to call it?
Heads.
Okay. It is heads. Which side do you want?
Government.
Okay. So, without further ado, we will begin with the first speaker of the government. Whenever you're ready.
Good? Okay. And can you put your hand up high? Okay, thank you. So before I begin, I'd like to extend a round of thank yous to everyone for being here, my partner for debating this topic, the British debaters for coming to visit Richmond and also willing to entertain such a ridiculous topic to debate, and also all of you guys in the audience for coming out to hear all of this. So thank you guys so much. So to start, we would like to state that this House regrets the rise of meme culture. So what do we mean by this? We want to define meme culture by specifying that this is referring to the uptick of people using internet memes, that is internet jokes, in the past several years, stuff like the doggo, cash me outside, that kind of thing. So we're gonna have three contentions to raise about why this House regrets the rise of meme culture. So I'll start with our first point. The first point is that the use of memes diminishes our intellectual growth and stimulation as a people. George Orwell once wrote, "A man may take to drink because he feels himself to be a failure, and then fail all the more completely because he drinks. It is rather the same thing that is happening to the English language. It becomes ugly and inaccurate because our thoughts are foolish, but the slovenliness of our language makes it easier for us to have foolish thoughts." The reason we describe memes in this particular way is because they deaden discourse, especially on meaningful issues related to politics or social justice. People are less incentivized to actually critically think about what they're discussing and instead do things for likes, retweets, and attention. So you'll get a lot of are you triggered type memes rather than, actually evaluating the value of what you're putting forth into the public space. It incentivizes attention and not necessarily intellectualism. So to see how this is actually a problematic thing, because on the one hand, you probably tweeting out a silly meme about politics isn't going to have that much effect, but the reality is this rise that we're seeing lately is actually affecting, people with actual power right now. So we're going to have to pick the very obvious example of Donald Trump and his relationship with memes. So there are two really prominent examples that come to mind when you think about Trump in this sort of sense. So the first one is, I'm sure most of you guys have heard about this, he tweeted out this GIF of him basically tackling CNN. And then there was a different situation which was similar where he basically tweeted out this anti-Hillary Clinton meme that someone else made, but it was anti-Semitic. It had a Star of David, which kind of implied a whole kind of uncomfortable relationship there. But basically, the fact that these things are hitting people with a lot of influential power means that we're deadening our discourse even in the actual space where that discourse should be happening. So even if you guys happen to enjoy, sharing weird GIFs of Donald Trump tackling CNN, that may not matter, but now this is actually getting into a space where even other politicians are doing this. The second contention we have to regret the rise of meme culture is that memes can actually be used to hide some pretty ugly things. The internet in general, I'm sure most of you know from going around, it tends to be a hotbed for finding a lot of very niche things. So you'll have furry communities and people that are really into books or something like that, and that's fine. Most of those are pretty innocent, but then you have some very insidious groups like Nazis and white supremacists that find a space online to talk about their own issues that they wish to address. So one prominent example of this becoming really problematic is Pepe the Frog. So Pepe the Frog was created by an innocent cartoonist. He had no relationship with any of this, named Matt Fury. But a bunch of white nationalists over the past few years had actually started appropriating this little weird cartoon frog that he drew up to basically push their agenda. And they basically Photoshop images of him with a Hitler mustache and all of that. The LA Times reported in October of 2016 that in some instances, Pepe wore a Hitler mustache and his signature message is replaced with "Kill Jews, man." And in other images, Pepe was posing in front of a burning World Trade Center dressed like an Orthodox Jewish person with a yarmulke. And then there was another one where he's spotted wearing a Nazi uniform and in a KKK hood, and et cetera. It goes on. But the idea is, perhaps we think, okay, well, it's just a cartoon frog. How much influence does it have? The reality is people don't just show up and declare that they're a Nazi one day. These things are a gradual process. So when people begin to interact with websites that post all of these memes and stuff, they might see an innocent image that perhaps pokes fun at something that they have thought about in the past, and through there they begin to get more and more radicalized. They get a soft introduction through the use of jokes. Yes?
When people post these offensive memes, do you also think that memes enable minorities to share memes in solidarity with one another?
Yes, we're not denying that happens, but we also need to acknowledge at the very ugly end of this that people can this image can be used to promote a hate symbol. So actually the Anti-Defamation League has recently declared Pepe the Frog as a hate symbol, despite its original intentions. And in fact, Donald Trump Jr. even posted an image on Instagram that included a Pepe the Frog, along with the Donald Trump team, which has its own uncomfortable implications that come out of that. Our third contention is a little more practical and a little less abstract, is that in general, these memes can have pretty disastrous effects on people that are actually, portrayed in the memes. So people's drive for attention can occasionally cause some unsafe, dangerous situations. One example is that there was this guy named Acton Beale who lived in Australia, and I don't know how many of you guys remember what planking is, but planking is basically this meme where people would just lie down on things, but in weird places. So he did that on his 7th floor balcony to, make a joke, and then he died. But then these things also hit people that haven't even signed up for that question in the first place. One prominent example is this kid who was 14 years old, and he went into his school's little department and swung a fake lightsaber type thing around. And that video went viral. One of his classmates posted that without his permission. And essentially that video went viral and he had to transfer schools because of how much he was cyberbullied by both people at his school and also people online that he never met in his life. He's now a lawyer dealing with cyberbullying issues. That's how bad it got to the point that he was suicidal. There are other examples that my partner will raise to describe exactly how harmful this issue can be. But in the end, we would like you to side with the fact that we ought to regret the rise of meme culture. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for putting on this event. It's been really fun. One personal anecdote before you start. You may have noticed in the two bios that were read out of us before this debate started that I haven't actually won a debating competition in my life, and Becky has won lots of them. This always gets pointed out because they say finalist at Northern Ireland Schools Debating Competition. It's a euphemism for not the winner. But over the last 2 years, and I've been more heavily involved in debating in the UK and Europe, I have felt like I have been part of a community of European debaters. And the reason I felt like I'm part of a community of European debaters is largely because of this Facebook group called Debating Shitposting, in which I put up MS Paint pictures of my friends, which other people know and get likes and angry reacts about. I think memes are important at forming that both my individual identity as someone who is a debater and likes debating within that context, but also my group identity about how I value being part of this community of people and how I value myself within that. We think that those formations of identity are vital in this debate, and we think that's why we win this debate from side opposition, because we show that how memes can be a positive force, particularly for marginalized and disadvantaged communities. So before I get into my speech, some points of rebuttal to what we just heard. So firstly, we say, we get the argument that memes make people stupid. We sort of are unsure about this contention that people are stupider now than they used to be because of memes. Like, emojis are basically just hieroglyphs, right? Like, people used to worship cats and people worship cats now. We think stuff, in a sense, never really changes. People always liked these sort of weird, stupid things. But even then, we think that the way memes work, you need a fairly sometimes it's sort of a complex understanding of how a joke works in order to find memes funny, right? We think that they can be complex and meta and interesting in that way and actually be engaging in that way. Secondly, they talk about Donald Trump. We would say that memes didn't cast any votes in the 2016 presidential elections. To plagiarize Shakespeare, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our memes, but in ourselves. It is unfair to blame memes for this. We think that the hatred that they are talking about was nascent in society long before Donald Trump came along. Then they talk about niche things and how niche things can be involved. Firstly, a little bit of kink shaming, not sure I'm okay with that. Then we talk about how memes can be alt-right memes and Pepe the Frog, right? We think that memes can be used, as much as they can be used to further this alt-right hatred, we think that they can be used to counter this alt-right hatred. We think there are memes that can be used to call out people who engage in this. You can spread information so quickly because of meme culture that you can say these things are unacceptable. We think also because of the accessibility of memes, people are able to engage more with politics, with important issues, because they can see them digested into funny things or important things that are just in a little image that they can actually care about, rather than a Wall Street Journal editorial. Then they talk about planking, right, as being particularly harmful for people because it might be dangerous or because it may go viral against your will, right? We think that planking was funny for a while, for as long as a meme is funny, a few days. We think that probably made quite a lot of people happy. It gave some people a lot of amusement. Maybe it gave them something to talk about. We think that that's kind of important given how generally miserable and depressing quite a lot of people, quite a lot of working life is. We think that sounded less depressing in my head. I apologize. But we think that fun things are important. Giving people more fun is probably a good outcome, even if it has these things. And then they talk about people who get, cyberbullied or whatever. We think it is obvious that social media platforms have a responsibility to protect people in those kind of situations. We don't think meme culture as a whole necessarily involves people cyberbullying one particular person. We don't think that's a fair example to necessarily talk about. So how do you form personal identity? We think that in a social media age, you are what your social media says you are, which is who you follow, what celebrities and fandoms you're in, what you like, to be literal. We think that means that the fundamentals of your personality and what you identify with rely on your ability to tell people what you like, your ability to tweet about it, to make Facebook statuses, to make memes about it, and to like and share memes about it. This is me with regards to debating shitposting, as I told you. It's Becky when she's liking things on hummus memes on Facebook. We think that these things, although they are trivial and stupid, help us express ourselves. Moreover, because there's such a low bar to create a meme, I can create a meme on layout and notes of my phone. This means that it is creative and contributive. There's no gatekeeper telling you that you can't contribute to this fandom of that band you like, right? It is just whatever you can come up with. And it's so low that you can contribute, you can feel in control of your personal identity. That's really important, because when people feel in control of their personal identity, they feel more happy about it. They don't feel like anything's being imposed on them. They feel a sense of fulfillment and self-actualization. We think that's really, really good. Yeah, we think that's more good, and specifically when you do it as a group, right? Because a lot of memes are in-jokes. They are jokes that you will only get if you have a specific set of knowledge. This is why you have meme pages based on like one particular TV show or one particular band or whatever, because you need to have a certain knowledge or understanding or experience in order to understand how that in-joke works. We think this matters particularly a lot when your culture has been historically marginalized by society, when people say that, like, when you don't see your experiences reflected in mainstream media. We think the existence of meme culture allows like reflections of what you like to be shared and you to tag your friends in them and you to enjoy them together as a group. We think that that's particularly important for these groups, and you see it in LGBT spaces, you see it in with racial and ethnic minorities as well. We think that giving those communities an extra tool where they can talk to each other, they can be in control of how their group is represented, and they can make jokes and make light of the bad things that they experience is a good thing, because it makes their lived experiences less harmful to them. So we think that even if you don't accept the benefits that people have of like just making their lives better, being able to tag them, tag people in things, to share things, to comment on things, even if you don't accept that people become better individually and have better individual relationships, we think that the benefits to these marginalized groups and how they form their own group identity and their ability to form that group identity without anyone imposing it on them, we think that those benefits are so crucial that we win this debate from op, and I am happy to be on side opposition. Thank you.
So first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here and coming out to support the debate team. This is really great. I've been in debate for a while now, and I think it's really important to increase our focus on communication and being able to express ourselves in a full and meaningful way. And that's really why I think the government is going to win this round, because of the necessity of expressing ourselves in a meaningful and full and politically valid way. So I'd just like to first review and finish up talking about the government case, and then I'll move on to talking about what the opposition has just told you and why those arguments don't indeed allow you to negate. So first of all, with our first contention that memes diminish growth and intellectual stimulation and are in fact a way of corrupting the language and rendering it less useful. They've said that people never really change anyway because people like cats and emojis are basically hieroglyphs. But this isn't true. This isn't true, because things do change, and indeed they change quite rapidly. In the last few years, large swaths of the world have politically veered from the largely liberal consensus in the aftermath of the Cold War to a much more nationalistic worldview. And because of this, we can see that things in politics do change. Now, they've also said that a complex... Yes?
Do you think that the lurch away from the liberal consensus is more to do with cartoon pictures of frogs or more to do with long-term resentment against globalist capitalism?
Now, as I was going to explain in my second point, it's not only memes, but the memes bring it to a forefront, and they yield power in a way we describe in our second contention. I'll get to that in a second. So also, the opposition was saying how you need a complex understanding in order to get the jokes in memes. But it doesn't seem like this really makes sense either. How complex does your understanding of humor and politics in the world need to be to understand that a crock full of beans isn't especially a pleasant thing? So moving on, as I promised I would, to our second contention, that memes allow alt-right and other unsavory groups to sneak into our political consciousness by legitimizing themselves through humor. That essentially what they do is they disguise themselves in humor and in ways that you might not recognize. and so began attracting followers that way. And this is exactly why it's important that politics can change so quickly, and this is exactly why the swing towards the alt-right that has taken place recently is especially critical. They've said that it's unfair to blame memes because they just brought nascent things to the forefront, but that's exactly the problem. Memes do bring things to the forefront. They have brought the entirety of the alt-right to the forefront by showcasing its theft of Pepe the Frog, its, you can basically take your pick of any meme that the alt-right has co-opted and used. And because of this, we can see that memes do play a role in this, and this is critical. Furthermore, they've said that the alt-right can be combated with memes, but if there are no memes, I think we can see that, or if there is disapproval of memes, then the alt-right won't be able to use these to gain the power that they are trying to gain. And because of this, we can see that it is better to disapprove of memes than to try and fight fire with fire and end up just burning the whole house down. So moving on to our last point, that memes can indeed have a disastrous effect on people. They say that planking was funny, and the fun outweighs somehow the fact that people have died while planking in ridiculous situations in order to get that kind of laugh and in order to get that kind of fun out of people. Well, personally, I find it a bit hard to believe that our moments of hilarity can outweigh the fact that people have actually died. And furthermore, this isn't even the only issue. A report by ProPublica recently discussed how employees at retirement homes are using memes to make fun of their clients. Indeed, at the Clarksville Skilled Nursing and Rehab Center, employees sent out Snapchats of a resident's bowel movements in the hand of a coworker with a caption that said, "This is what I do at my job." Not only is this clearly pretty disgusting, it also goes to show that this isn't just a few isolated cases of death. This is also a more broad movement of violations of privacy and general disgustingness. And because of that, we can see that, again, memes do have a disastrous effect on people. And this doesn't exist in isolation. This all links together. The disastrous effect it can have feeds into its effects on political thought and discourse, which also feeds into the importance that memes have in promoting the alt-right. Now I want to move on to the opposition's case. They made a number of interesting points, but I think, first of all, they said that it's critical that memes help us express ourselves. And they help us express ourselves simply and easily. You can make them even on your phone. But this doesn't make sense, because the opposition has already claimed, when addressing the government's points, that in order for advantages to be got in this debate, you must be able to show that it's unique to memes. And so either they have to agree that the impacts, the results of the alt-right using memes is fine as it is, or they can't claim that expression by memes is necessary to expressing ourselves generally. Second of all, they've claimed that there's no bar and there's no gatekeeper, and this is why it's such a great form of expression. But this, again, is exactly the problem. Because there is no bar, there's no judgment of this is a good thing, this is a bad thing, this is uncomfortable, this is related to neo-Nazis. And this is critically why memes can become problematic. Because traditionally, we have had filters that let us judge what is acceptable and what is not, what is right and what is wrong. But memes, when they are disseminated, allow a rapid rise and a rapid deterioration of those conditions. Indeed, Kay already came up and explained to you why memes specifically contribute to the rise of the alt-right by breaking down those barriers. By breaking down those barriers between what is humorous and what is disgusting. Now last, they've claimed that the historical marginalization and the ways it can be addressed with memes is such a critical point that they can win based on that alone. They claim that especially even without a gatekeeper, this is important. But I think the fact that without a gatekeeper, without some kind of norm and regulation, such as has been brought about by the massive explosion of memes in recent times, we can see that this has indeed caused a decline. As we've already explained in our case, this has allowed and facilitated the rise and recruitment of the alt-right. And because of this, we can see that we do need to have norms and we do need to have a gatekeeper. Otherwise, it may be nor here nor there, nor indeed might even be detrimental to those communities that that the opposition is trying to promote. Furthermore, this is the key point, and this is why the government is going to win today. Because without any kind of regulation, memes can have a disastrous effects on our political thought, on the content of our politics, because they can facilitate the rise of the alt-right and the marginalization of communities. Thank you.
You're now in line for the member of opposition.
Good evening, y'all. I don't know if you're as surprised as I am that there's not been more jokes in a debate about memes. So I'm going to respond to their arguments, but I'm also going to try and push the joke agenda. Because team opposition, we're of the side of jokes and the joke agenda. So just bear that in mind when you're thinking about who you're going to vote for. I'd like to reiterate the thanks for everyone who's put on this event. It's a lovely university, lovely topic, and hopefully you will come away from today's event feeling stimulated and inspired and excited to debate stuff, although probably not all topics are as fun as this one. So 2 arguments that I'm going to bring to you from member of opposition side. Argument 1 is talking about memes as an identity signal. Basically, the summary of this point is why people really hate on millennials, why that's really stupid, and why memes are really fun, and it's kind of nice that we can control our voice and our values and our opinions. And then point 2 is talking about political engagement, why that gets better on our side of the house. But first of all, I'm just going to do a couple of responses to what we've heard. So if you listen to what the previous speaker said, it sounds like on our side we have to defend giving more power to the alt-right. Funnily enough, we don't think that's what we have to defend on our side of the house. We think that side cherry-picks some of the worst examples of social media generally and meme culture and says, here, you have to defend Snapchats about poo and stuff like that. We don't think that's what we have to defend. We're going to take a holistic view of the debate and think about all of the issues and explain to you why we nonetheless think that memes are beneficial. So argument 1 that we heard from the other side, that memes diminish intellectual growth, and that's really harmful when people in power, i.e. Donald Trump, can use memes. I mean, maybe the problem is Trump, not memes. Like, point 1, response 1. Also, response 2 is that there's been a lot of international critique, right, of him using those memes in a dangerous way. So we don't think it's sufficient to just pick that one example and say that that leads to a diminishment in intellectual engagement. We also think that memes can sometimes be a gateway to thinking about issues that you never thought about before. So if you see a meme, I mean, a meme is basically a picture with a short caption, right? If you see a meme of a politician in your country with a kind of funny, scathing comment, maybe you never thought about that politician before, but maybe that picture stimulates you looking into that topic more, discussing it more with your friends. We actually think it probably helps more people engage with intellectual stuff. The second point we heard from them is it legitimizes alt-right groups through humor. I mean, I think this is a vast oversimplification to see that somebody sees a meme about a cat who's like with the alt-right or whatever, and then they suddenly have really extreme far-right opinions. Okay, this crowd is quite cold. I feel like we need to bring the energy level up a bit. I'm talking about cats, it's funny, please laugh. We think it's an oversimplification. You don't just laugh your way into membership of the alt-right. We don't think that's fair. Then they say the global political swing towards nationalism is because memes. We think that that's a huge oversimplification of the political system. We think, for example, in the US, where there's been a rise in nationalist sentiment, maybe that's because, for example, in the recent general election, other people had legitimate concerns about the opposition candidates, right? That's a huge oversimplification. There's loads of individual political situations that's being referred to in that, so we don't think you're able to just point to memes and say that's the relationship. They say that we're talking about social media generally instead of just memes, but they also talk about Snapchat, so they can't have their cake and eat it. We need to make this debate specifically about memes. And then they say, if we make an argument that memes help people express themselves, we therefore have to accept that it helps people like the alt-right express themselves. But as Richard pointed out, he said that often when you look at memes, it's memes that are created by people with similar experiences or characteristics to yourselves, right? It's when you appeal to groups with which you already belong to. So we don't actually think as many people consume these memes made by the alt-right as they might want to suggest. So moving on to my first point, talking about social activism. So lots of people belong to different identity groups, right? And those characteristics can drive the experiences that you have in life. So as a woman, there are things that I experience that other women might experience too. For example, being on a bus in public transport and having some random person that I don't know come up to me and say, "Can you smile, love, because you're looking a bit sad?" And sometimes it's really annoying to have to explain the entire premise of feminism, like literally in every single conversation I have with somebody. So sometimes it's really nice to just share an image with a woman being like, "Oh, when a guy just tells you to smile." That's really nice. It sounds like it doesn't sound unimportant. It sounds like a small event that one person experiences, but loads of people across loads of different identity groups will experience that. So say if you're an international student from the UK living in America, I mean, this is an experience that Richard could relate to, being a big tea drinker, and you can't find your favourite English breakfast tea. You can share a meme with someone from your identity group, and it feels nice because you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to justify the starting point of your analysis. So that applies to people in feminism. It applies to people in LGBTQ spheres. It applies to people who experience oppression on the basis of their ethnicity. And we don't think the other side have responded to this argument. We think that matters a lot. I think that you need an outlet, and sometimes it's just nice to feel like you have a support network, and memes give you that support network when you don't have to be in the same room as somebody. You can connect with people internationally when they have shared experiences. An example of a fun one of these is when it was a teacher's one that I saw. So it was like how I imagine teaching, and it was like engaging with all these kids and everyone's learning and it's really happy, and then like the reality of teaching is like you in front of loads of velociraptors, like what on earth is going on? It's really nice to have those connections with people and build that support network. This is also really important for millennials. So I have a list of ridiculous things that people say about millennials, right? We're treated as if we're like the magical unicorn of the population. So it's like, oh, you have avocado on toast all the time, so you can't afford a house. It's like, well, maybe the fact that we've been saddled with so much freaking debt is why we can't afford houses all the time, right? Or I heard the other day that millennials were at fault for the soap industry failing because we don't like to use soap. It's like, are you kidding? So millennials in particular benefit from meme culture because of exactly the kind of language that the previous speaker said. So he said that memes are corrupting language, when actually we think memes are about taking language back for ourselves, right? Maybe we have weird jokes, maybe we like avocados a lot. I don't think that's a bad thing. But memes give us a sphere to communicate and share our values and experiences in a way that's not controlled by the narrative of the man or the establishment. And that really matters, particularly for minorities. And we think that side needs to deal with this argument themselves. Second point I'm going to talk to you about is political engagement. So here's the thing. A lot of young people have not been engaged by politics in the past. A number of reasons for this. One, politics is perceived as being stuffy. Two, because there are these weird age restrictions about being in office. So you can't take a political position until you're old enough because young people's experiences don't matter, right? Or because of a lack of diversity in politics. So you don't see people, you don't see women, you don't see ethnic minorities and groups of power. You think that politics isn't for people like me. But actually, memes are a much more effective way of engaging people in politics because they talk in a language that means something to us. It isn't tainted by power systems which have systemically ignored us. So, for example, in the UK, they keep throwing more money at pensioners because they always vote, and then they triple student fees for universities, right? Memes give us a way to express ourselves and understand language and issues which matter to us. We think it's exactly the problem that people want to say it's unintellectual, that it's corrupting the language that we use. We think actually it's a really cool way of sharing our values and our ideas with people, and it's fantastic when you're in an identity group or in a weird niche interest like debating, and you can share your jokes and you can share your values without having to justify yourself. Very proud to be on side opposition. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to have to talk faster than I thought I was going to have to talk. Okay. So, 5 things in this debate that we think that side government have brought you and our rebuttals to them. So, first about alt-right groups. One of their major contentions, and one of the most important ones, is that memes are the fuel by which the alt-right has been able to assert itself. We have 3 kind of rebuttals to this. Firstly is that we think that there are a variety of long-term economic and political factors that meant that people were more economically insecure, people were drawn towards radicalism, and we think that those factors were always bubbling away under the surface, and that the fact that they are coming to prominence now is merely inevitable and is not necessarily reliant on one social media trend. Secondly, we think that the conversation happening as a result of that is a large conversation involving lots of diverse groups in society, particularly in America, but also to a lesser extent in the United Kingdom, about how historically racist the structures of government have been, about how structurally racist a lot of societal institutions have been, and how we should minimize the impact of those. We think that the conversations that are going on, the fact that those conversations exist is a good thing. We also think, and Becky specifically showed you this, why marginalized groups are better able to assert themselves, better able to talk about themselves and take control of their own identity and feel solidarity within their own identity at the point at which they are able to share memes. Secondly, they talk a lot about the president, right? And I'm trying to be diplomatic here as a person from the UK, and I'm aware that as someone from the UK, I cannot stand on a high horse with regards to making stupid, idiotic political decisions. But there is a meme which I saw, it was on Twitter, where it was a tweet where Donald Trump had retweeted a picture of the Trump train wearing a Make America Great Again logo. And then they said that the United States has gone from electing a Harvard law professor to a man who retweets a train with a hat on it. We think that that was a decision that America made. We don't think memes made that decision. Then they talk about planking and the Darwin, and they talk about planking and dangerous memes or whatever. We think that 150 years ago, a man jumped off the Eiffel Tower with wings strapped to his arms because he thought he might fly. 50 years ago, Evel Knievel got his motorbike and tried to jump 13 double-decker buses, right? And they did those things, even though they were stupid and dangerous, for the attention, right? We think this is something that humans do no matter what scenario they're in. We think that is entirely a wash. Then they talk about people at a retirement home sharing pictures of bowel movements, right? Firstly, we think, as Becky points out, this is very like a millennials, am I right? Like people sharing these pictures. But it reminded me of, like, people have always liked like sick or obscene or things that push like social taboos, right? It reminded me of Tom Lehrer, who I'm mentioning because you should all look up Tom Lehrer. He's a great musical artist, but he was a pianist in the 1950s who was described as sick, who was one of his reviews was his muse is not fettered by such inhibiting factors as taste, right? People found it really funny at the time. And like people like those rude, obscene things, especially people with, pardon the pun, shitty jobs, and have to do these things. Finally, they talk about language, right? They say that memes destroy language, that people don't know how to talk to each other, right? We think that language always evolves. We don't feel the need to preserve language the way it is in the late 20th century as the perfect way, right? Otherwise, we would still be talking like, if we were talking in English, like Chaucer or Shakespeare or any 500-year-old white man. We think that the interplay between language, we also think that memes have a relatively complex interplay between language and meaning. You have to know certain things in order to understand them. We think that a greater understanding of that is good. We think memes are good for everyone because they're fun and they help marginalized people happy to be on side opposition.
Alright, so as the anti-joke side, I'd like to clarify some parts of the resolution as we've stated. The resolution states, this House regrets the rise of meme culture. We'd like to clarify that the government is not saying we need to abolish every single meme off the face of the internet. some memes are good. We're not gonna, go against that. What we're arguing against is the rise of meme culture as we see it today, which is pernicious and pretty harmful and actually affects our day-to-day lives very much. So before I get into reiterating the government's position, I'd like to rebut some of the things that the opposition has raised in their last two speeches. First, they argue that social media is not really a relevant part of this conversation, that some employee Snapchatting something at their job does not count as a meme. We've defined the memes as internet jokes, and the reflection of taking a picture of a piece of poop and being like, my job sucks, is well within that definition, we would argue. Secondly, they seem to simplify a lot of the arguments we proposed by saying that we're arguing that memes have caused all of these things. We're not arguing that memes created Nazis. I imagine that memes did not exist in the 1930s. However, we can talk about this current rise of meme culture not contributing in a negative way to the current political climate. My partner mentioned that we live in a context where the world is becoming a scarier place for our generation. The opposition has talked a lot about millennials. Millennials are kind of in a tough position. We're facing a lot of very ugly things in the world, and we need to be very careful about the way we communicate. The opposition has also raised a lot of controversy with the idea that memes have a lot of power and stuff, and they say, the alt-right would still exist without, all of the memes and everything. But we need to acknowledge that the way we communicate ideas is just as influential as the ideas themselves. The Communist Manifesto would not have been that influential if it was never published and people never read it. Memes are something that are accessible, as the opposition said, and can make, as we've mentioned, really pernicious, awful ideologies come to the forefront and make them become a big part of our discussion. And that's where you get things like Pepe the Frog becoming harmful. The opposition has defined our alt-right point in very simplistic terms. We're not arguing that Pepe the Frog makes you a Nazi. We're arguing that because of the way meme culture has formed itself, it allows people with extremist ideologies to mask these harmful ideas into a nice, more palatable way, and that way people ease into these communities more gradually in a way that's a little more insidious and potentially harmful and reaches a greater audience than perhaps they would have if they were just serious Nazis. So we would like to reiterate the government's positions. First, that memes can diminish the intellectual growth and stimulation of our community. Again, addressing the opposition, we're not saying that memes make you stupid, as they said. We're saying that especially when it reaches political discourse, as Donald Trump, and keep in mind, Donald Trump's not the only person that does this. There are other influential journalists and politicians that engage with this behavior as well. We're deadening our political discourse. We're instead just allowing people to prioritize giving attention rather than actual meaningful discourse to these issues. And that kind of goes against the point that the opposition raised, that political engagement is a meaningful thing that memes contribute. Because yeah, maybe you find a funny meme about Donald Trump and you're like, maybe let me think about this. But odds are you don't. You see the meme and you laugh and you don't think critically about what you saw. Are you actually getting meaningful political engagement out of that? That might be even more harmful than you just not having an opinion in the first place. Secondly, as we mentioned before, these memes can be used to hide really harmful ideologies, using Pepe the Frog as one of the most prominent examples that came up in mass media a lot in the past year. And third, we'd like to talk about how these memes can have a disastrous effect on the people that they relate to. The opposition has been very dismissive of some of the examples that we've raised. A person died from planking. The opposition has basically said that people's laughter is more important than a person dying. I really question that kind of line of thinking. On top of that, they've also diminished the fact that this employee at a retirement home who Snapchatted a resident's private, body and actions and publicized it with their friends to make a ridiculous joke about how their job sucks. That's not okay behavior. That is not healthy way to handle the way we deal with our emotions. So that is why the government regrets the rise of meme culture, and we need to really critically think about the way we communicate the ideas in our current society and in the context of our society. Thank you. All good. Can't blame you.
So it looks like the break's overwhelmingly won, so congratulations.